In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, where the domed ceiling shimmered like a dying star and delegates floated or slithered in from every corner of civilized space, one truth echoed across species lines. Humans were a nuisance, but a manageable one. The execution chamber was ceremonial, designed more for optics than efficiency. Crystallized sound pillars lined the dais to record the occasion, their sensitive tips vibrating in time with alien breath. 1,000 eyes, some faceted, others pupilless, watched with a sense of elegant disdain. Their prey stood silent at the center, a human, bound not by shackles, but protocol. Ambassador Martin Vale looked entirely too calm for a man about to die. He stood tall, his formal Earth-blend uniform crisp, collar slightly rumpled, as though he'd been adjusting it until the moment they dragged him in. No sweat, no trembling, only the faintest upward twitch of his mouth, like someone about to deliver a punchline no one else understood. The Threxorian general clacked his mandibles and leaned forward, towering over the human like a skeletal obelisk. "Do you have any last declarations, biped?" Martin smiled. "Oh, just one." He paused. "This isn't the end. It's the opening move." The chamber didn't know what to do with that. Some species didn't process metaphor well. Others suspected it was a threat. A few laughed. The council, ever proper, did not flinch. Verdalian Chancellor Luslas adjusted her aquatic voice modulator. "The council finds the accused guilty of unauthorized treaty manipulation, subversive interspecies influence, and emotional warfare under Clause 12. Sentence: immediate termination." Martin gave a shallow nod. "Understood." The beam lanced through him cleanly. His body, caught mid-turn, dissolved into particles. The last to vanish was the expression on his face, still mildly amused. The sound pillars stopped humming. Silence held for a long moment. In the gallery, above, the human delegation sat still. No outcry. No protest. One figure, garbed in Terran mourning black edged in crimson embroidery, lowered her head briefly, then raised it again, eyes wide open, watching. Some took that for grief. A few mistook it for shock. The Threxorian general saw something else entirely: calculation. Later, in the outer rotunda, where the walls exhaled cold air and diplomats gathered to speculate in whispers, the humans did not weep. They left the chamber in quiet pairs, murmuring, nodding, exchanging brief glances, but no wails, no threats. Some aliens, especially those from empathetic species like the Zovari, found the lack of display disturbing. The Zovari High Seer touched her translucent fingers to her temple, attempting to read emotional residuals from the event. Normally, she could catch echoes, grief, indignation, even hate, but the humans had left behind only static. It was as if a great blank space had swallowed their collective reaction whole. And in that static, something else stirred, something the seer could not name. The widow Lucy Vale remained. She stood at the foot of the council's high steps, her hands folded before her, posture straight, face unreadable. Two council aides approached her, unsure whether to offer condolences or request departure. She beat them to it. "I would like to speak before the council," she said gently. Her voice was soft but well-trained, the kind that carried across rooms without raising volume. The Verdalian aide blinked both sets of eyelids. "On what grounds?" "Terran Charter permits diplomatic continuation in the event of a representative's termination. I was Martin's deputy in all but title, and his wife." She let the last word hang. He would want someone to offer a closing thought. The Threxorian aide hissed low. "This isn't a memorial platform. I wouldn't insult the council's efficiency by treating it as one." Lucy smiled, small, polite, sharp as a scalpel. "I merely asked for the standard half-cycle of speaking time. To honor your process, of course." Both aides hesitated. The Verdalian turned to his comm link. "I'll make the request." The Threxorian narrowed his eyes. "Your people don't cry much, do they?" Lucy tilted her head. "Oh, we do. Just not always for the reasons you expect." Word traveled fast. By the next rotation, Lucy was scheduled to speak during the post-verdict review, a formality session most species considered paperwork with voices. But this time, seats were filled. Not just with dignitaries, observers, press spheres, independent system envoys who'd previously ignored council sessions now tuned in, drawn by the strangeness of it all. What kind of species executed a diplomat and then invited his widow to speak? What kind of widow accepted? The Zovari seer, still unsettled from the day before, met Lucy in the preparation antechamber. Protocol. Nothing more. But as she reached out to touch the human's shoulder, a customary blessing, her fingers stopped an inch from a fabric. She felt no intent, no emotional weather, no signal of inner tide. "Your grief is silent," she said, voice quavering. Lucy met her gaze. "I found that silence travels farther than screams." The seer said nothing. She retreated without completing the ritual. Elsewhere in council subchambers, debate simmered. The Threxorians pushed for a security lockdown. The Verdalians, affronted by the idea of disruption, countered with legal codes. The Zovari warned of ripples in the mindstream. "You're all overreacting," barked Councillor Mrash of the Nyx, a species known for logic and zero imagination. "Humans are dramatic. Let her talk, then let them go home and write poems." "Or war songs," muttered the Threxorian general. But the council had already agreed. Lucy would speak. And so, on the gleaming floor of the Grand Chamber, beneath the spires of light and the silent gaze of 1,000 alien species, the widow of a dead man stepped forward. She walked like someone used to pressure, like someone who had memorized every step of the stage and weighed the echo of her heels against the solemnity of the moment. When she stopped, she looked up, first at the cameras, then at the dais, then at the execution site. A brief pause, a breath, and then she began. "I won't take up much of your time," she said. "My species values efficiency too. Perhaps not in the same way as Verdalians, but efficiency of meaning, of story." A few delegates exchanged glances. "Martin Vale, my husband, stood here yesterday. He spoke one sentence. It wasn't meant for you. Not really. It was for me." She turned slightly, facing the gallery. "I'm not here to accuse you. That's not how humans grieve. We don't aim our sorrow at the nearest target. We let it ferment, turn it inward, make something sharp from it." She smiled softly. "Sometimes that's a song, sometimes a flag, and sometimes it's just a reminder." A flicker passed across the crystal pillars. Sound waves caught and stored her cadence, level, rhythmic, oddly calming. "Martin always told me diplomacy was just chess with fewer honest rules. You think you're watching for attack, but really, you're watching for patterns you don't understand yet." There was an edge there, subtle and polished. "Martin planted a lot of patterns. You executed a gardener." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "But I understand. Truly. The council has traditions, timetables. Emotions make you uncomfortable, especially the ones that don't arrive on cue. We're new. We confuse you. We make jokes during negotiations. We drink during funerals. We give gifts you can't quantify. And you think that's weakness." Her voice didn't rise. If anything, it softened. "You look at us and see a contradiction. A species capable of terrible violence and impossible beauty. You can't reconcile it, so you label us erratic, dangerous, unfit." Now she looked directly at the Threxorian general. "You're not wrong." He twitched. "But what you fail to see is this. We are what the universe made us to be. Survivors, learners, quiet apex predators wearing the skin of philosophers." She took a step closer to the dais. The guards didn't move. "And every time you mistake our patience for passivity, every time you read our smiles and think it means surrender, you tell us more about yourself than you know." The Verdalian chancellor leaned forward. "Madame Vale, are you implying?" Lucy raised a hand. "I'm implying nothing. I'm simply mourning, as is my right." She turned toward the execution circle. The light that had taken her husband's life shimmered faintly. "I do have one request. It's small. Silence. A chair." "A what?" "A chair," she repeated. "Leave it here. At the center of the chamber. One chair. Human design. Unoccupied." The Threxorian general snapped. "For what purpose?" Lucy looked back at him with that same faint smile. So you never forget the space he once filled. Then she bowed. Not deeply. Just enough. And she left. The silence after her departure was thicker than any noise. The seer, clutching her temple again, whispered to no one, "We read humans wrong." The Verdalian aide checked his files again. Lucy Vale's diplomatic credentials were valid. But the embedded codes contained layers he hadn't noticed before. Cipher within cipher. One phrase repeated under a complex Terran metaphor protocol. Checkmate pending. Somewhere beyond the chamber, starships reoriented. Silent transmissions flickered between Terran embassies. And Lucy Vale walked calmly back to her quarters, fingers tracing the edge of a message cube left on her husband's desk. His voice, calm and amused, greeted her. "If you're hearing this, well, I suppose the opening worked." She smiled, and the stars shifted course. The chamber was fuller than usual, not from obligation, but something far more dangerous, curiosity. They had all seen death before. Executions weren't rare in council justice, though they were typically reserved for violent insurgents or rogue hive minds, not soft-spoken ambassadors with dry wit and slow smiles. Not men like Martin Vale. Not humans, unless one counted accidents. Now his widow, Lucy Vale, had been granted time before the council, a move debated behind closed doors for half a rotation, until someone remembered that denying her might raise more questions than allowing her to speak. It had been easier when humans were new, easier when they were just quirky diplomats with confusing idioms and a tendency to cry during treaties. But then Martin Vale had begun shaking things. One alliance here, a rephrase clause there. He'd smiled while pulling threads. No wonder they'd called him dangerous. Now the woman who'd shared his bed stood before them in mourning attire. The hem of her black dress shimmered faintly with a fine threaded red, a hue humans used to signify respect for fallen warriors. Some species didn't notice. Those that did sat up straighter. Lucy stood alone. No aides. No guards. She had refused both. When the council acknowledged her presence, she didn't begin immediately. Instead, she walked slowly, purposefully, to the center of the room. The execution platform still bore faint echoes of what had been done. Some cultures would have cleansed the space. Humans apparently preferred leaving the stain visible. "I won't waste your time with platitudes," she began, voice calm and deliberate. "Or dramatics. You've seen enough drama for one cycle." Several delegates exchanged wary glances. The Zovari seer, now swaddled in silken layers to block interference, kept her eyes shut, as if the lack of vision might help her hear more clearly. "I'm here," Lucy continued, "because you invited me to speak," which was generous. "You allowed my husband to plead his case. You found him guilty. You executed him without incident. That's what you'd call a success. A closed file. A demonstration of the council's integrity." A pause. She let the silence settle like sediment. "But humans," she said, "tend to carry stories inside them like seeds. And stories don't always respect endings." The Chancellor of the Verdalians leaned forward, mildly curious. "You have a story for us?" Lucy smiled softly. "Of course. We always do. But it's not a parable. It's not meant to soothe or warn. It's meant to reveal." Her fingers remained clasped, her posture still. Her presence, however, expanded with each word. "There's a creature on Earth called the anglerfish. Deep sea. Ugly, by most standards. It carries a small light in front of its head, like a beacon. The smaller fish, the ones drawn to wonder, mistake it for beauty. They get too close." She waited. And then the mouth opens. The Threxorian general twitched. "Are you comparing your species to a predator?" Lucy tilted her head. "No, General. I'm comparing your assumptions to prey." Laughter would have been inappropriate, but a few species who appreciated verbal irony gave low whistles or clicks. "You've been trying to make sense of us since we arrived. You say we're too emotional, too primitive, too irrational to hold serious power. And yet, you worry when we don't flinch. You're suspicious when we adapt faster than your models allow. You're unsettled when we do nothing at all." She turned slowly, letting her gaze sweep across the delegates. Her eyes were brown, an unremarkable color. Except in that moment, they felt like mirrors held up to every secret in the room. My husband once told me that fear often hides behind analysis. That when a species doesn't understand something, it calls it illogical and moves on. But humans? We make a habit of understanding things that try to kill us. It's one of our oldest skills. There was a stillness to the room now, and not the passive kind. The kind that came when predators cross paths, and no one knows who will move first. Martin wasn't building alliances. He was studying stress points. He wasn't manipulating sentiment. He was observing it. Your power, your rules, your sanctimony. He knew exactly how fragile it all was. He told me once, the Empire thinks it's a cathedral, but really it's a deck of cards. The Threxorian stood. Is this a threat? No, Lucy said smoothly. It's a eulogy. The Verdalian chancellor cut in. You're out of order. I'm out of mourning. Her voice dropped an octave. You took something from me. Not just a man. Not just a diplomat. You took the illusion that this galaxy could operate on mutual respect. Now I've adjusted accordingly. The Zovari seer spoke without opening her eyes. She is hollow, she whispered. She radiates nothing. Not grief. Not rage. Not deception. She's quiet. Lucy turned to her. That's because we trained ourselves to feel after the mission, not before. The room shifted, a subtle collective recoil. Until that moment, most had assumed Lucy Vale was a spouse stepping into a symbolic role, a grieving partner playing at dignity. But now the scales fell away. She wasn't reacting. She was executing. During the interspecies trade forums last year, she said, Martin and I introduced a clause that allowed shared jurisdiction over Terranone stations in Council space. You all signed it. The Verdalian aide began whispering furiously into a communicator. That clause included something called a latent authority trigger. If a Terran diplomat dies in custody, human representatives are granted temporary operational access to all joint infrastructure until the matter is internally reviewed. That's absurd, someone snapped. It's binding, Lucy said. You were so eager to look like collaborators, you didn't read the fine print in our native tongue. You assumed kindness meant weakness. That was a miscalculation. Chancellor Luslos blinked slowly, her gills fluttering in alarm. Are you saying the human delegation has seized council facilities? Not seized, Lucy corrected. Recalibrated. The systems were programmed months ago. Martin was very methodical. The Threxorian general barked a command. An aide rushed out. Lucy didn't flinch. Our stations are now broadcasting updates. Quiet ones. You'll see diplomatic shift patterns, redacted fleet positioning requests, resource swaps that circumvent council tariffs. No weapons. No armies. Just information. And in our species, information is often more fatal than fire. The seer stirred. You did not come to grieve. I came to finish the sentence he started. The room was electric with confusion, fear, indignation. Species who once viewed humanity as a well-meaning oddity now scrambled through memory, trying to trace every deal, every dinner, every casual nod from a Terran and wonder. Was that a move? Was that a step in a plan? The Threxorian returned with news. He whispered, tried to soften it. But the Chancellor's expression fractured. Human-controlled systems had gone dark across 12 sectors. Not hostile. Not explosive. Just quiet. Too quiet. Lucy clasped her hands behind her back. We don't want your thrones, she said. We don't envy your fleets. We simply wanted a seat. You gave us a funeral instead. She stepped back toward the center, to the site where her husband had vanished in a burst of ordered light. I've walked among your people. I've watched your ceremonies. You call them justice. We call them predictable. Humans evolved not just to survive predators, but to become the ones you never see coming. She tapped a small cube from her dress pocket. It projected an image, the chair she had requested. Empty. Plain. Unremarkable. You asked yesterday why I wanted this left here. No one answered. So when you look at this chair, remember, humans mourn by building. by adjusting, by ensuring the loss means something. And that chair? That's not a symbol of absence. It's a warning. Her voice softened, but the words only became sharper. Every time you underestimate a species that smiles at you, remember this chair. She turned to leave, but then paused. "Oh," she said, as if recalling something unimportant. "And if any of you are wondering how long this has been planned," she smiled. Martin Vale was never the plan. He was the opening note. The doors opened without command. She walked through them. No guards moved. No aides dared follow. Behind her, the room felt colder. The seer whispered, "The humans, they are writing something." The Chancellor asked quietly, "What?" "A new chapter," she replied, in a language we never learned. The galaxy did not collapse all at once. That would have been too merciful. It frayed at the edges first, as small anomalies began whispering through the interstellar channels. Nothing alarming on their own, just curious interruptions in Council protocols. A research station in the Verdalian sector requested duplicate supply authorizations. A Threxorian outpost reported communication static punctuated by human children singing lullabies. The Zovari dream chambers, once serene pools of precognitive clarity, began to murmur contradictory visions layered with voices that didn't belong to any known species. They all had one commonality, a timestamp that began exactly 33 seconds after Lucy Vale's departure from the Grand Chamber. She didn't return to Earth. She didn't flee or vanish. She moved into the quarters her husband once occupied, ordering tea from the same dispenser, sleeping in the same bed, reviewing old council logs with quiet focus. Some thought it was grief. A few thought it was arrogance. None guessed it was part of the endgame. The Threxorian general, who had never trusted silence, launched an immediate internal review of all active systems in council territory. He ordered his aides to manually disconnect satellite arrays rumored to be compromised. They never returned. Not dead. Not missing. Just reassigned, according to logs signed in flawless Threxorian calligraphy, though none of them had ever learned to write. The Verdalians were the first to panic openly. Bureaucracy, they believed, should never improvise. But their records were being rewritten, gently, subtly, with elegant phrasing that bypassed detection software. Human influence didn't announce itself. It simply began to seem official. A high-ranking Verdalian chancellor finally confronted Lucy on the council promenade. "You are tampering with council infrastructure." Lucy looked up from her tablet, sipping something from a ceramic mug. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was steady. "No," she said. "I'm just overseeing Martin's remaining projects. He had quite a few open threads." "You are causing instability." "No," she repeated. "I'm just showing you where it already existed." The Chancellor sputtered. "You're manipulating council systems with smile-coded encryption and post-symbolic framing. Half your diplomatic transmissions are riddles. I'd say a quarter at most. Do you deny you've subverted half the bureaucracy of this empire?" Lucy gave a faint shrug. "I didn't have to. You built it flimsy and ornate, like a chandelier in a wind tunnel. All we did was whisper." The Chancellor turned purple with rage, an involuntary biological response. He stormed away. That evening, his entire comm staff submitted resignations written in Shakespearean sonnet form. He'd never spoken English. The truth was beginning to bleed through the cracks. Martin Vale had not been collecting allies. He had been sowing obedience through cultural osmosis, embedding Terran thought patterns into minor diplomatic staff, art departments, linguistic councils, and software standardization boards. He had trained hundreds, none of whom knew they were part of a coordinated campaign until they all started finishing each other's sentences. Lucy had simply arrived to water what had already rooted. The Zovari seer, driven mad by prophetic dissonance, begged the council to issue a system-wide pause. She claimed the timeline had begun folding in on itself. She painted visions of stars blinking in Morse code and gravity wells humming old Terran folk songs. The seer was silenced. No formal punishment, just an internal sabbatical with soothing tones and sensory fog. But the fear spread anyway. Fear didn't need an official memo. On the second cycle after Lucy's speech, a key Verdalian information hub collapsed, not from hacking, but recursion. Every input command began answering itself. A message appeared on every screen. To truly understand a system, give it a mirror. The council tried to vote for emergency protocol suspension. The motion passed, then unpassed, then reversed entirely before anyone could confirm who entered the order. The minutes of the session were transcribed in cursive English. The Threxorians demanded action. Their general stormed into Lucy's quarters unannounced, flanked by 2 guards. She didn't stand. She merely looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You forget your place," he said. "I remember exactly where it is," she replied. "Some of us carry maps in our blood." "You think this is a game?" "No," she said. "I think it's the end of one." He stepped forward. "Give me one reason not to detain you as an enemy of the Empire." Lucy set her mug down gently. "Because if you touch me," she said, "you'll validate Protocol 7.3.7 in the Terran Threxorian Compact, triggering unilateral disengagement of all cooperative military endeavors, and nullifying 23 active peacekeeping agreements. Your fleets would be alone, your bases exposed, and your enemies, well, let's just say they've been watching." The general narrowed his eyes. "You wouldn't risk galactic war." She smiled. "You already did. You just didn't realize who you declared it on." He left, not in defeat, but in uncertainty. Which was worse? Word of the confrontation spread like solar flare. Within a rotation, over 100 sub-factions within the council began auditing their ties to Terran interests. What they found was not sabotage. It was dependency. Human consultants in every department. Human technology holding their systems together. Human literature shaping policy language. There was no bomb ticking under the Empire. There was a heartbeat. It was Terran. That was when the council demanded Lucy appear once more. This time under full review, not as a guest, but as a subject of inquiry. She arrived without protest, dressed in simple gray. No symbols. No weapons. Her hair pinned up as if she'd just finished a meeting. She took her seat before the assembly and waited. "This body," the Verdalian Chancellor began, "formally charges you with subversion, infiltration, and malicious diplomacy against the integrity of the Galactic Council." Lucy nodded. "That sounds about right." "You admit guilt?" "No," she said. "I admit precision." The Zovari seer had been released for the session. Her mind steadied with chemical bomb. She watched Lucy and whispered, "The storm was not above us. It was within." Lucy inclined her head in respect. "You were the only one who listened." "We wish to know," the Chancellor pressed, "what the purpose of all this is." "I'm fulfilling a treaty," Lucy said. Murmurs rose. "What treaty?" "The Terran Contingency Accord," she replied. Clause 17. Subsection 8. If a Terran diplomat is executed without universal consensus, Earth is granted the right to initiate systemic countermeasures to ensure future protection of its emissaries. That clause was theoretical. Lucy met his gaze. "Then this is a practical demonstration. You dare to hold the council hostage?" "No," she said. "I'm showing you what a hostage looks like." She gestured to the chamber's massive observation window. Outside, a row of ships hovered, not military, not sleek, but repurposed scientific and trade vessels. Terran models. Their signal lights blinked in perfect, synchronized intervals. "Those are our culture ships," she said. "Unarmed, fully staffed, each one assigned to a sector where Terran presence has been officially requested by subpopulations tired of council order. We're not invading. We're responding." The Threxorian general stood again. "You are waging psychological warfare." "Not warfare," Lucy corrected. "Redecoration." "But to what end?" She finally leaned forward. "We learned a long time ago that fire burns fast but leaves ash. Influence, however, rewrites memory. You will not fall because we crushed you. You will fall because in 100 years your great-grandchildren will speak Terran Standard and quote Shakespeare without knowing who wrote him." Silence thickened. "This was never vengeance," she said. "It was policy." The seer whispered, "They are turning us into themselves." "No," Lucy said softly, "we're giving you the choice." You can keep your titles, your seats, your traditions. Just know they were all rewritten while you were busy looking at our smiles. She stood, slowly, without being dismissed. No one stopped her. The game, she said, was already over. Martin played the first move. I was the last. She walked from the chamber. Behind her, no one moved. Far beyond the council spires, the stars blinked. Some thought it was interference. Others suspected Morse code. But the humans already knew the message. The Galactic Council no longer met in full. There were too many absences, some from resignation, others from retraction, and a few from quiet disappearances no one wanted to explain. The chamber remained grand and echoing, but it felt hollow now, like a throne room where the king had left and no one dared sit down. Lucy Vale had not spoken publicly since the inquiry. She had walked out of the chamber like a woman leaving a library, pausing only to nod at the council guards, who no longer knew whether they were meant to salute, arrest, or ask her for advice. The humans never claimed territory. They didn't deploy fleets or drop banners or rename planets. That would have been too simple, too obvious. What they did was slower, smarter, more terrifying. They helped. They offered solutions to food distribution crises. They sent Terran linguists to interpret outdated council scripts no one else could read. They reorganized diplomatic codes to be more inclusive of minority cultures. They supplied medical equipment with user manuals translated into every major dialect. And they did it all with the same tone they'd used for years: warm, curious, helpful. One by one, smaller species realigned, not by force, but by familiarity. Earth's language became the preferred medium of interstellar trade. Terran conflict resolution models replaced decades-old protocols in arbitration sessions. Children in Zovari schools began memorizing Earth proverbs to help build emotional resilience. No one had ordered these changes. They had simply made sense. And Lucy watched it all unfold from her quiet post beneath the silver sky of Edric Station, one of the oldest hubs in Council territory. It was now jointly managed. The Terrans had taken a maintenance wing and turned it into an administrative suite. White walls, modest decor, no flags. Just a chair in the center of the main room, plain and empty. Every day, she walked past that chair. She never sat in it. A Threxorian envoy came to see her once, weeks after the inquiry. He had lost much credibility, command, cohesion. The military caste was fragmenting. Soldiers no longer trusted council directives. Some had even requested transfer to Terran-led missions, citing better treatment and more transparent objectives. He didn't snarl when he saw her. He didn't speak right away. She poured him a cup of the bitter Terran brew Martin used to favor. Black, unsweetened, dense with memory. "You planned this," he said at last. "From the beginning." "No," she replied. "Martin did. I finished it." "Why tell us now?" "Because pretending you're still in charge is exhausting. And I'm not here to humiliate you. That's never been our way." He stared at the steam curling above the mug. "Then what is your way?" "To change the temperature of the room. Not by lighting a fire, but by lowering the thermostat slowly until you start dressing differently." He didn't drink the tea, but he didn't leave angry either. The Zovari seer passed away shortly after that, whispering human nursery rhymes with her last breath. Her successor, chosen from the youngest tier of dream readers, had been educated in a Terran-run empathy exchange program. He did not read the future. He studied it. The Verdalian Council splintered. Its central logic servers had been irreparably altered, not destroyed, simply overwritten with an elegant recursion that began quoting Shakespeare during fiscal debates. The chancellors tried to fix it, but the backup systems had also been reprogrammed, each by a different Verdalian technician, each of whom believed they were acting independently. None of them knew their training protocols had been written by human consultants over a decade ago. Lucy didn't gloat. She didn't send declarations or step onto podiums or accept medals. She simply went on, quietly managing the collapse of an empire that had mistaken itself for unassailable. She kept Martin's office untouched, except for one change. On his desk sat a data cube. When activated, it played his voice, a personal archive, recorded long before his execution, stored in fragmented packets across Terran diplomatic channels. Only Lucy had the encryption key. "Eve," his voice said one morning as she reviewed system updates, "if you're hearing this, then the Council did what we expected." She sat back and listened, letting his words fill the room. "You always said I was too careful, that I planned like a man who knew the ending of a book before the second chapter. You were right, but I had to be, because they never saw us as equals. Not really, not you, not me. They saw us as clever pets, entertaining, sentimental, disposable." He paused, the recording flickering as it adjusted to her breathing. "But here's the thing about humans. We carry every mistake in our marrow. Every war, every peace, every betrayal. We remember. And when we walk into a room of giants, we don't shout. We watch where the cracks are." She looked at the chair, still empty. "If I'm gone, that means you've made it further than I ever could. Which means they're listening now. Not because they trust you, but because they're afraid. And fear is the most honest attention they've ever given us." His voice softened. "Burn nothing. Claim nothing. Change everything." The message ended. She closed the cube and went back to work. Somewhere, beyond Council space, a rogue system requested Terran aid in developing cultural infrastructure. Lucy approved the request, then flagged it for emotional oversight. Integration was easier when people felt seen. The Threxorian general resigned quietly. His successor attended a Terran-run leadership program disguised as a cultural exchange. By the time he returned, he no longer barked. He conversed. The Verdalians rewrote their founding charter to include shared diplomatic frameworks with co-architect species. Earth was not named, but its fingerprints were everywhere in the phrasing. The Council still met, but not in plenary. Small clusters, specialized boards, emergency task forces that always seemed to defer to Terran guidance. The center of gravity had shifted. No one had voted on it. No one could say when it happened. But the galaxy had changed its language. Not just its words, but its tone. Lucy Vale was invited back to speak on the Day of Concord, a holiday once meant to celebrate the Empire's formation. Now it was billed as an anniversary of intercultural resilience. She wore blue that day, the color of Terran neutrality. She stood before a chamber full of hollow thrones and filled seats, and gave a single sentence. "May your memories never outweigh your capacity to grow." No more, no less. Afterward, reporters tried to stop her, desperate for soundbites. "Do you feel victorious?" they asked. She smiled. "We feel present." "What do you call what Earth has done?" She paused. "Adaptation." Behind her, the Council doors stayed open. She returned to Martin's office, where the lights dimmed automatically to match her mood. She placed a folded note in the drawer beneath the chair, the same one no one had sat in since his death. Then she turned out the light. Somewhere in the outer systems, a new voice began whispering through encrypted channels. Human voices, teaching, asking questions, listening with disarming care. They weren't here to conquer. That would have been too simple. They were here to stay. And the galaxy finally understood. It had not been invaded. It had been welcomed. Welcomed into a story it thought it was writing, until it realized it was just a character in someone else's plot. One written with patience, with charm, and with a smile beneath the steel.